Welcome to this edition of Locked On Pirates and Locked On Rockies here. It's a Locked On crossover where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates and your Colorado Rockies every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can see the Locked On Podcast Network at Times Square. That's popping up lately all of a sudden. And Sirius XM alongside some of your radio broadcasts that will be popping up pretty soon. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, eBay Motors, Ultimate Baseball GM, and depending on when you're listening, it could also be brought to you by Built Bar. Never really know. It'll come out when it comes out for you, but you will be having it on your airwaves on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Ethan Smith, the host of the Locked On Pirates podcast, and obviously we're talking Rockies Pirates here, and I'm going to obviously be in a much more cheery mood than my counterpart over here, Paul Holden. Paul, how are you, sir? How are you doing with everything that's going on in Rocky Land?
Rocky Land, it's gotten worse and worse. It's been a tough losing streak. It's been a tough moments of realization. But, I mean, I try to be chipper, but unfortunately, I have just been in a sour mood and lots of ranting on the podcast lately. I mean, what is there to analyze? I mean, it was on the Rockies are just simply. I've used the word so much, but the Rockies are embarrassing right now. I mean, it is unfortunately just. I said it before. I'll say it again. The Rockies are playing the worst baseball in the entire league right now. I truly don't believe that the Rockies are the worst team in baseball, but right now, at this moment of recording, the Colorado Rockies are the worst team in baseball.
Yeah, and we talked about some of these statistics that happened in this series, and I was going to have them all outlined, but there was just so much that happened in this series that it was kind of impossible. But the big overarching thing, the Rockies scored 3 runs in all 3 games of this series. The Pirates scored 33 runs combined in the series, so that was obviously a big deal. For the Pirates fans, the quality start streak continued to 9, which is something that was unheard of last year. I actually had a statistic yesterday on Twitter where I said that Mitch Keller last year by himself had 13 quality starts of the 32, I think, that the Pirates had all year last year. They're currently on a 9 quality start streak right now, and I believe they already have 11 this year out of the 19 games that they played. And right now, the Pirates are one of the best teams on the road in baseball. It is insane. This is not the start that any of us expected, especially with losing O'Neal Cruz last week, which really any baseball fan was just really upset that that happened. But as I told you, Paul, before we started this is my 3rd year at Locked On, 3rd year on the Pirates podcast. And year 1 was that 2021 season where I had to cover Josh Bell getting traded. I had to cover Jamison Taillon getting traded. I had to cover Joe Musgrove getting traded. And Brian Reynolds and Adam Frazier were the only bright spots on this club outside of Key Brian Hayes, who then broke his wrist in the second game of the year. I've said it to you before that the Rockies, as currently constructed, really remind me of that Pirates team, because you were telling me about some of the prospects that you guys are looking forward to, some that are already here, but also the fact that you have some guys like Mike Moustakas on this roster, which makes no sense to me whatsoever in terms of the current structure of your roster. But for Pirates fans that may not know, where do you think most of this struggle comes from? Because obviously we're very accustomed to it. We've only seen 4 winning seasons in the last 25 years. So we're very accustomed to being in the spot that the Rockies are in right now. But what would you say is the biggest issue that is going on with the Rockies and why the Pirates were able to do what they did over the last 3 games?
I don't have any confidence and faith in the front office of this organization. You mentioned there's a key word and a key difference and that I mentioned. You said trade, underline trade. The last big trade the Rockies made was the Nolan Arenado trade, and the ghost of that loomed over this series greatly. Austin Gomber pitches in the series finale and lets up 9 runs in 2 innings. Another bad start for him on a long list of bad starts. Not only did Austin Gomber get lit up, I don't have the stat, but it's 10 plus balls hit over 100 miles an hour off the bat. The Pirates came out in this finale swinging literally, and their outs were loud. And the player, the big prospect in the trade of Nolan Arenado is Luis Montero, and he was just benched for Ryan McMahon to move back to third and them to go to Alan Trejo at second. Alan Trejo deserves playing time. It's no slight to Alan Trejo here, but Elenis Montero was the big piece. Austin Gomber has shown us enough where we know what it is he's capable of. He is not a starting pitcher in this league anymore. The plain and simple. He needs to be in the bullpen. His curveball doesn't have the movement that he has to do. So the Rockies need to move on from everybody that isn't a young player. The Rockies are way older than you think. The Rockies need to let Charlie Blackmon retire. They're going to be Charlie. You mentioned two, I guess, the two vets that should stay around for the Rockies are going to be Charlie Blackmon and Chris Bryant. No one's going to touch Chris Bryant's contract. That might change because Chris Bryant has actually, played well, but there was he just hit his first Coors Field home run, and then and Chris Bryant's played in 60 games for the Rockies now in year 2 of this contract. It all stems back to, honestly, failing to sign DJ LeMahieu. That's where it started. The Rockies had something special. The Rockies had the pieces, and they knew they had these pieces. But they've let the good ones go. And this starting pitching has no depth. They have, and there's no energy. There's no confidence. I mean, and that goes to the top. I used to not be as critical, but of Bud Black, because I don't necessarily believe too much in like managers having like this crazy role. But Bud Black's supposed to be a pitcher's manager, and the pitching has only gotten worse. And they have continued to make the wrong mistakes and not bring back pitchers. I mean, it's just mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. So I don't see the Rockies as the Pirates, because the Pirates have decided the Pirates use the word rebuild. The Rockies literally won't. They have said they are never rebuilding. That's never their plan. So the Rockies are more content with mediocrity than they are. But my stat for you, Ethan, from the series here today, and I will put the star on it. It's a Wednesday day game against the Pirates, and you and I are both realistic about that. But the crowd today at Coors Field for the finale against the Pirates, 18,511, the lowest in more than a decade. There's no interest in this team. There's no reason to watch this team, and there's no identity to look for the future. You mentioned multiple prospects that are exciting and fun and cool. The Rockies need to see more from their prospects, and on top of that, they don't have anyone that's going to come up and pitch for this team. They lost out on this rotation and these pitchers that they built. John Gray's not here. Antonio Senzatella's hurt, and I'm still confident in Kyle Freeland and German Marquez. Kyle got lit up in his last start. I believe that was the first game against the Pirates, was it not, or was that the
that was the first game, actually, because I remember looking at it that he had like a 0.91 ERA entering the game. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, Kyle Freeland has had 3 of his 4 starts have been good starts for the Rockies. And you know what? Sometimes it happens. You get lit up. I'm more confident in Kyle Freeland. So there are bits and pieces to be excited about, but there's no real identity. There's no real direction. And if you're benching the big prospect in the Arenado trade and nothing's paying out, I mean, you didn't trade Trevor Story. You didn't trade John Gray. You didn't trade Carlos Estevez. You didn't trade DJ LeMahieu. You didn't trade any of these players, and you call yourself a draft and develop. Mm-hmm. Why aren't you letting the young guys play?
Yeah, and
why? I mean, and a prime example. I've kind of went off there, so I'll end on this. The Rockies are the biggest mistake the Rockies can do if they continue to lose, because I guess it's early enough to say that, yes, maybe they can turn it around a little bit and get back to more of what they think is their goals for the season. But how much more time are you willing to give CJ Cron and Mike Moustakas and Jerks and Profar and these players over your young prospects? Will the Rockies actually just rip off the Band-Aid and say they are going to embrace a 100-loss season, which the club has never done that before? But lowest attendance number in a decade and the worst start in franchise history. Those are that's a recipe for 100 losses.
Yes, and Pirates fans are all too familiar with having 100 losses, considering we just did it the last 2 years, and if the 2020 season would not have been short, they went 19-41, so you can take a pretty good guess that would have been 100 losses. Maybe something that could help the Rockies, especially with battling with the Colorado Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets right now, who are both doing great things. I actually had a joke today that the game today was just a pregame for the Nuggets playoff game tonight and like a
That's
reason
what
to
they
keep
all are.
drinking after the Avalanche game last night. So lots
Right.
going on in Denver right now, but maybe the Rockies need a Built Bar. Looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. You got to try these. If you're like me and you want to have a healthy snack and you want better healthy snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, well, you get Built Bars because they're healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing you won't even think they're good for you. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now, you don't have to just go to built.com. You still can if you want to, but you can now go to Walmart or Sam's Club, where you can still get your favorite specialty flavors at built.com and Walmart and Sam's Club. So, 4 bar box of cookies and cream, a 13 bar box with all the hit flavors. Built Bar does it all, and you can still use code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order when you invest in the best protein bars on the planet. Tomorrow, or whenever, sometime this week, we're going to have Craig Toth here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Paul, of course, you'll be doing your thing. I'm sure you're going to be previewing the next Rocky series. So what's in store for the Rockies for the remainder of the week and heading into the weekend?
Rockies head to another team that has disappointed, I would say, for a lot of this. They head to a Phillies team, and it's, again, I think the Rockies are facing another situation that they faced last weekend. They're heading to an opposing team's ballpark for a get-right, looking for a team looking for a get-right series. Mariners crush the Rockies, and you can see a little bit more, people give a little more energy and boost to them because they, that's the sign of a good team, is when you handle when the bad team comes into town, you win that series. Even better if you sweep. And then it's a plus, like for a team like the Pirates to do that on the road. Those are the plus signs. The Rockies are facing a 10-game losing streak unless they can, take down another team that's struggling as well. But it's Rockies on the road. It's they're not going to have German Marquez back, and that thin starting rotation is going to be on full display again. And this Rockies offense is going to continue to sputter. I mean, if it changes, great. The Rockies have so much work to do, though. And I'm curious, Ethan, to kind of flip it, looking ahead for the Pirates, how sustainable is this? And how does it feel to kind of see the process pay off a little bit? You mentioned 3 straight tough seasons, but again, these teams that struggle, they at least admit to the struggles more than the Rockies and commit to plans. And right now, you're seeing why this can pay out. So I'm curious, looking ahead for the Pirates, is this sustainable, and is this the plan working?
Well, and I wouldn't call it the plan working just yet. I've always labeled 2024 as the year where we can actually legitimately have an idea of what this team is going to look like for the next decade following. 2025 has kind of been coined Pirates World Series 2025 because that's when you're going to have the likes of Eddie Rodriguez up here, who's already going to be up here this year, but then he'll be a veteran, almost a veteran at that point. But I mentioned to you that it is rewarding to the sense that we've seen guys like Key Brian Hayes now who have come into his own. I mean, he had wonderful plays in this series defensively. You look at David Bednar, who they traded for in the Joe Musgrove trade, who's a Pittsburgh native. He's arguably the best closer in baseball right now. You look at guys like Rowanty Contreras, who you also traded for. Mitch Keller has finally seen a maturation. You're seeing the maturation of a lot of these guys that 2 years ago I was talking about as potential pieces to this team. Then you add G1 Bay, who came out of nowhere. You add Rodolfo Castro, who right now from the right side is one of the best hitters in all of baseball. You add Brian Reynolds, who, I mean, how many times has Brian Reynolds been in trade conversations over the last 2 or 3 years? He's still here. You bring back Andrew McCutchen. You bring in Carlos Santana, Rich Hill, Vince Velasquez, Austin Hedges. They've created a team that's very interesting to me specifically and interesting to a lot of people in baseball in general, where you have these veterans that you bring in for a decent amount of money. Like for the first time in a while, the Pirates actually went out in free agency, threw $8 million at Rich Hill. They threw $4 million at Vince Velasquez, $6.5 million at Carlos Santana. G-Man Choi, who sadly is going to be sidelined for the next 8 weeks. They threw money in him, or threw him in a trade, which was really the first move of the offseason. But then where it seems like with the Rockies, where they have like a bunch of guys that are aging, but nothing really here yet, the Pirates have the advantage of having these veteran guys as somebody that these young guys can look up to. And I mentioned it to you before we started recording, but I'll say it again. I don't even think this is the best version of this team. You're still going to add Luis Ortiz to this mix eventually. You're still going to add Eddie Rodriguez to this eventually. Leover Peguero, Mike Burrows, if he comes back healthy from his injury he sustained a few weeks ago, he's another guy you could throw in there. Osvaldo Beto, Colin Selby. I mean, there's so many different names. Nick Gonzalez you could throw out there. Cal Mitchell. There's a lot of different names that the Pirates are going to have at their disposal that just aren't even here yet, that are arguably better than the players they have right now. So when I ask if it's sustainable, I do think by June or July, once that roster shifting kind of starts happening and you hear some trades start to pop up about guys like Rich Hill, Vince Velasquez, Santana, guys like that, then that'll kind of take the wind out of the sails a little bit. You don't want 2018 to happen again. And Pirates fans know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you probably do too. When the Pirates are a little under 500, but they were just there on the division lead. They were like right outside of it. They make the trade for Chris Archer, trading Shane Baz. They trade Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows, and it was one of the worst trades the Pirates have ever made in their franchise history. Do you do that again? Like, do you make that risk again where you move on from some of these prospects and go out and get that other starting pitcher you need, or do you go get that other bat you need? Just because of the amount of pure talent that this farm system, which is now ranked in the top 10 on MLB Pipeline for the fourth straight year, has at your disposal right now, I wouldn't. But sustainability, I still predicted 74 and 88. Maybe go up 1 or 2 wins, but I don't expect this team to be an above 500 team unless for some reason they just continue this offensive onslaught that they've had. And I truly don't know, but it is welcoming to see that, Joel Embiid always joked about trust the process. The Pirates are trusting the process, and it's paying off for them at least minimally right now, but it's going to continue to be minimal wins that are then going to lead to that peak that they're eventually going to hit.
And you mentioned a list of a bunch of exciting players, but again, a guy that is a great player to just insert into your lineup and one that clearly had a massive impact in this series, former Rocky Connor Joe. I mean, that was a great move. I mean, you just feel a little bit better. Again, I think that's the right mindset for a team like the Pirates and the Rockies. Say if the Rockies were kind of off to a start that I was hoping they were capable of doing, but clearly not. You feel just a little bit better because you're seeing, okay, this can work. But while on the back of your mind, it's April. It's early April. There's plenty of ball left, but it shows you that this team is capable of doing stuff. And again, it's important to beat bad teams on the road. And the Pirates didn't just beat the Rockies. I mean, the Pirates thrashed the Rockies. I mean, absolutely dominated the game. The only thing I would say is both of these teams can't play very good defense right now. I think the Pirates were playing if they didn't have 2 double-digit leads in games, could have been bit more by some of the defensive issues that both of these teams are facing. So what are you hoping to see? Maybe we'll get into this here coming up in segment number 3, but I'm curious what you want to see the Pirates improve on and what you are still a little bit hesitant towards. And is this team going to be able to take on to some of the folks that we have on coming up here in the division? Because I'll just spoil it for you here. I'll just answer that question for you. I don't think the Rockies stand a chance against the NL West, even while the NL West struggles. So maybe we can get to that here after we hear from some of the people that help make this show possible.
Yeah, and some of the people that do help make this show possible and that could possibly help the Rockies, by the way, Paul, they're great at building their vision part by part. They're great at fixing things. eBay Motors. Now, eBay Motors, they might not be able to fix a baseball team, but a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for that green check that you're looking for. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit, ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around, so you don't have to juggle and spend more money. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. And with over 122 million parts, almost as much as the Chris Bryant contract, to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Yes, Broncos country, let's ride. Speaking of, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL pods. The NFL draft is next week. Steelers people, you already know Christopher Carter, my king over there, doing Locked On Steelers work, where he was this close to predicting Bud Dupree coming back to the Steelers, but he went to Atlanta for a little more money. Obviously, he'll be talking about the Allen Robinson trade a lot this week. But you were talking about where the Pirates can improve. And in closer games, because I don't think that's a metric here in this series, really, outside of the second game. I don't mind the base running aggressiveness. I don't. It's
I
fine to be
love it.
aggressive.
I
I
I
love it.
am. I'm sorry to just jump on you, but like this is one thing I'm so envious of teams, and it's one thing that's going to be more apparent, especially when the Rockies play the D-backs. I would love for the Rockies to have more speed and base running
Mhm.
aggression. It didn't the Pirates did get burned in this series a couple of times with the
Yeah.
base running aggression, but man, I gotta say I love that teams are going.
Yeah.
Let's steal some bags.
Yeah, and I don't mind it, but then again, like let's say it's a closer game here, 4-3 in the eighth inning or something. I get trying to be aggressive in some of those spots, but there are some times where I'm like, are we really sending Connor Joe here? Like Connor Joe's not like slow, but he's
Hmm.
not fast either. Like he's a speedy guy. Like he can run, but he's not like a prototypical base stealer. That's kind of just nitpicking a little bit. Yeah, I would like to see the defense overall improve. Some of the middle infield stuff is kind of getting annoying with O'Neal Cruz being injured. And I just hope that Key Brian Hayes, who has had injuries the last 2 years, stays healthy because if he gets hurt and they have to move Rodolfo Castro to third, that shortstop position defensively gets really interesting for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. So you just hope that he stays healthy. On top of that, I mean, the offense showed up in this series, but I do always like to put an asterisk on any game that happens at Coors Field because there were definitely some balls like the Rodolfo Castro home run on Wednesday. I was like, okay, I don't think that's leaving the park in Pittsburgh. I don't think that's leaving the park in like in other cities. Um, so there, consistency offensively, I think would be one thing, but it is very hard to be a consistent offense when you're having to get looks at so many young guys that need playing time. That's one of the biggest things that you really have to deal with. Um, Pitching right now is fine. There are certain points where I'm like, okay, stop having the tightrope through second and third with one out like Robert Stevenson had to do on Tuesday night. I was like, hey guys, I know it gives you an adrenaline rush to be in a bases loaded jam with one out, but maybe don't do that all the time. Like that's been the joke with Dowry Moretto, who you guys saw in the final inning of the Wednesday game. He like it's almost like he has like a affliction for like just getting himself in bad spots and then getting out of them. Fine with it if you get out of them, but if you don't get out of them, that's going to start becoming a problem. And this bullpen, there's a lot of injuries going on right now too that I think they're going to eventually catch up. G-Man Choi's out, O'Neal Cruz is out, Rob Zastrinski's out, Chase DeYoung is out. There's a lot of injuries going on with this team, and then JT Brubaker just had Tommy John surgery like a week and a half ago. So we'll see how they battle all that stuff. But I mean, I see the series that they have this upcoming weekend against Cincinnati is a big revenge series. They win on opening day in Cincinnati, which won me a bet against Stephen Offenbaker, which I'm still expecting that Pirates gear episode from you, Stephen. But then they dropped the second and third game of that series where they lose the two of the first three. Now the Reds come to our place where at home, the Pirates have not played many home games. They played a ton more road games, but they did not look near as good at home as they have on the road. So I do want to see them kind of hunker down at PNC, beat a team in the Reds that I know I shouldn't say we should be beating the Reds, but this is a kind of series where I'm like, okay, we need to like keep the good times rolling here. So I really expect a revenge series from them this weekend, and I expect the pitching to just keep doing what it's doing and win as many games as possible before you hit the wall. Rockies fans, you probably know too. Every team at some point in the year hits a wall. The Pirates are going to hit a wall. But why not win enough games like where they're 12-7 right now? Why not get to 15-8 or 14-8 or something like that? So when you do go on that 5-game losing streak eventually, you're still above 500. I think
Or
that's what I
eight.
want to see. Or yeah, or win 8 games. You never know. Or 8 games, yeah, like you guys right now. I mean, there's so many times that, I mean, even the Dodgers. Look at the Dodgers. I mean, they started the season terrible. The Cardinals right now are a mess. I don't know what's going on with St. Louis right now. I mean, they barely skated past you guys in that series before they played. Or wait, did they? Yeah, before they played us. So it really is just try to I try to always relate it to something else. You know, the sophomore slump, where like, oh, they're going to have a bad year in their second year. You know what's going to happen. So why not have at least a good start to the season so that when this wall does happen, it doesn't feel as bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a healthy. I think you're kind of exhibiting the right mindset of where the Pirates are at. I think again, focus on the optimism, but don't neglect that. Hey, this where there are still these issues, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest difference. I think the big summary from this series is you can see the Pirates trending upwards while you see the Rockies trending downwards, and I just the big question is going to be, when do the Rockies punt? When do the Rockies just say enough? Will they do it during the season? I mean, especially with if the team doesn't do like a drastic turnaround or doesn't have a swing. If this team is well out of it at the deadline and does not make some moves,
Yeah.
it just a continued misstep. I just think that is going to be a huge issue. Whereas the Pirates, are going to have to be a little more careful with the moves they make
Mm-hmm.
because they already tore it down. You already mentioned they traded, but all the X, Y, and Z away, but now you're seeing why that's a benefit. It's a if you don't feel like you're going to bring back these players or you're going to move on, get more in return, get a little extra, and it's going to help you. So I'm curious now though, does this start to tear the classic Reynolds trade? I mean, there's that it's going to be all over at the deadline. That's going to be you're going to be at every single crossover you do, every single time you talk on the pod, every comment is going to be about the potential moves, and of course, the Pirates being at the center of them there with with their players. Is that going to be enough to have them stand pat, or do you think the Pirates make some more moves and change it up in favor of getting these more playing time for this abundance of young guys?
I really do think right now, just the process of thinking has to be, where are they? You mentioned earlier, the NL Central is not that strong of a division. If they're in play for it, maybe they go after it a little bit. If they're not, maybe you just shave off some of the veteran guys. And that's where I think the Rockies need to be right now. The Rockies, albeit they looked bad over these 3 games, as a unbiased outside source, I'm here to tell you, teams would want CJ Crone. Teams will want Charlie Blackmon, Kyle Freeland, Herman Marquez. If Chris Bryant all of a sudden comes back into form and a team wants to eat that contract, a team will do it. The Rockies have guys that are pretty solid players that would garner at least something back. I mean, CJ Crone alone is a right-handed power hitting first baseman. Teams will want that on a playoff push. Charlie Blackmon is a veteran left-handed outfielder. Teams will want that. He's a guy that immediately enters the clubhouse, and from what I know from Charlie Blackmon, as again an outside source, the dude's an upstanding leader in the clubhouse. Any team will want that, even if he's your fourth outfielder. They'll still trade something for him. And I think from what I get from you and what I've heard, it's always better. And this is the thing that I used the last 2 years when they got barely anything back for Tyler Anderson and some of these guys that they traded. Although the Jose Quintana trade is starting to look awesome with Yohan Oviedo and Malcolm Nunez, it's always better to get something than nothing. Pittsburgh fans can attest to this, and Los Angeles Rams fans can attest to this. You swap seventh round picks to get Allen Robinson. It's always better to get something than it is to get nothing. And Rockies fans, I'm sure, you mentioned the Arenado trade earlier. I'm sure if they had a redo, they would redo that trade. They would redo that trade completely different, 100 different times, and it would probably still all those 100 times come out better than the way it did. But it is still always better to get something than to get nothing,
Yep.
especially in a sport where not only are you focused about the 26 guys that are on your roster, but the 50 or 60 that are below you that have potential to help down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you nail it on the head there. I mean, and it's a prime example there with the Rockies in action at the trade deadline the past 2 years. To not get anything. You got your Rule 5 draft pick for Trevor Story, who you at the time could have easily flipped. The package of John Gray and Trevor Story to a playoff team would have gotten you a nice solid, a nice pitcher and a power hitting shortstop, second baseman for in some instances for teams. But instead, nope, they walk in free agency, only Rule 5. Jose Iglesias, you have your shortstop of the future you're going to, instead of trading him to a contender last year, nothing. CJ Cron was the team's all-star and has cool, but he cools off tremendously. So I agree. You need to make, and you need to be willing to move on from these vets. Again, the Rockies, I think, take it very seriously that they've never lost 100 games. They need to not care. They need to embrace and actually tear it down and rebuild so we can get back to winning baseball in Colorado.
Yes, and speaking of baseball, for everybody wondering, of course, we mentioned it a couple times, the Pittsburgh Pirates will be starting their series against the Cincinnati Reds on Thursday. It's a 4-game set, while the Rockies, ironically, traveling to the state of Pennsylvania after the series, will be taking on the Philadelphia Phillies. So look for my coverage of the series here at Locked On Pirates. Look for Paul's coverage of the Rockies and Phillies series over at Locked On Rockies. Paul, where can people follow you on Twitter? Where can they follow your social media and find the podcast?
You can find us at Paul Holden 33 on Twitter. You can also find at LO Rockies as well, Locked On Rockies on YouTube. We stream a lot of our episodes live, so if you want to ever curious about popping in the live chat, hearing from the Rockies fans, we do that live a lot. So come hang out with us there. That's where you can find more Rockies talk.
Yes, and of course, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. You can follow Locked On Pirates and Locked On Rockies on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, SiriusXM, or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Ethan Smith. That's Paul Holden. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you guys on the flip side.